All right, I think it's time. Shall we start, guys? All right.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So
Yeah,
welcome everyone to the Let's Talk Tech event, organized by the Google Developer Student Club at the University of London. In the series, we'll be interviewing professionals with experience working in tech. I'm Nyamko. You can call me Cindy. I'm the public relations manager for the Google Developer Student Club at University of London Club, and I'll also be the moderator. So if you have any questions, leave them in the chat. And we have our two interviewers, Sebastian, Nicola. Sebastian, do you want to introduce yourself?
of course. Thank you, Cindy. I'm Sebastian Ramirez, and I'm the utility player for the GDSC at the University of London. And as Cindy said today, I'm going to be an interviewer for today's session. Nicola?
Yeah, I'm Nicola, and I'm a technical coach at GDSC University of London, and I'm also in my final year at University of London, and I will be one of the interviewers for today. And yeah, I would like to introduce our speaker for today, Justin Kim. So he works as a software engineer for Amazon, but I think that he will do that part better than me. So yeah, Justin, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hey, can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Sweet. Hey, so my name is Justin Kim. I'm also a student at UoL right now, but for my day job, I am a front-end engineer at Amazon. Fortunately, this interview came at a good time because I'm on my paternity leave, so I have time to do this. So let me just share my screen. I don't have much to share, but it might give some visual. So can you guys see that? Let me zoom in real quick.
Yes.
Yeah, so as you can see from here, right now I am a front-end engineer at Amazon. Front-end engineers are a subdivision of SDEs, which is like software development engineers. I've been with Amazon for, let's see, about 2 years and a half. And so far it's been very great. I recently had to move to Seattle because they are telling us to come back to work. But other than that, I am a father of two kids. One's a newborn that's about a month old right now. I'm happily married. Let's see. And I like studying on the side. You might have also seen me in the channel, in the Slack channels that we have. I make stupid jokes time to time. And I don't know if anyone here has seen it, but I made a Super Mario Bros. Clone for my ITP1 project last semester, which was very fun. But other than that, other than being all of those things, I used to on the side make YouTube videos. So it hasn't been updated in a while, admittedly, but I did manage to get a couple followers. So if you guys are interested after this talk on learning some JavaScript, React, and all that type of stuff, feel free to check me out here. It's at Angle Coding. And I did have one more tab open. So let me just explain quickly what I do at Amazon, things that I am able to talk about. So I work in the internal team at Amazon. So just to give you guys some background, I'm pretty sure most of you guys know about Amazon and what we do. Like we do a lot of things. Amazon has, let's see, like 1.6 million employees worldwide. So we need some type of tools to manage to help employees do their day-to-day schedule. And I am part of that team, one of many teams that helps internal employees out. So what I do is my team develops apps for internal employees to use, and what they can do is things like signing in, checking their schedule. We also have a lot of employees that have kind of weird non-traditional schedules, such as for example, I'm sure a lot of you guys have ordered from Amazon, especially those that live in the States. So those people that deliver the items to you, they have non-regular schedules. I don't know if you guys have experiences, but sometimes I get my shipment like at 12 at night or like at 5 in the morning. So these people have non-traditional schedules, and what they are able to do sometimes is like cancel a shift that they were supposed to have, add a new shift if there's more demand. For example, during holidays, we need more people to work to deliver products. Swap a shift with someone else. So there's a lot of things that Amazon employees are able to do. And what my team does is we develop the platform. One of the small part of this big app is called Amazon A to Z. And unfortunately, you guys could download this on the Apple Store and the Google Play Store, but you guys can't really use it unless you're an Amazon employee. So we help develop in this platform, and also we have a web version counterpart too. So kind of my day-to-day job is, because we are servicing two different apps, one for the mobile, which we use React Native, and one for the web, but they displayed the same data. My job recently has been to come up with an architecture where we could reuse the same logic for both platforms while keeping the views, one for React Native and one for React separate. So this is a pretty big undertaking, and we also work with a lot of sister teams, so it gets very complicated in the number of teams that we deal with. So my day-to-day job right now is like coming up with design documents and how we're going to do that. And I did come up with a design document recently, which we are testing out right now. Unfortunately, during my leave, so like they're still messaging me, but it's been fun. But that's pretty much what I do.
Well, great introduction. It's really interesting to see everything that you do at Amazon. And there's something that you mentioned during your introduction that caught my attention, and is that you were doing some tutorials on the web and posting them on YouTube. So what was your motivation behind that? What was the thing that made you, okay, I want to do this, to start with this channel?
So there's a lot of reasons. Just to give some background, before I started this degree at UoL, I studied math and physics at UCLA way back then, like maybe like 2009, 2012, around that time. And what I used to do for about 6 to 8 years was I tutored in math and physics for high school students and college students. And I did that part-time, and I really remember enjoying it. So when I started learning web development, which was maybe like 5, 6 years ago, obviously one of the platforms that I used was YouTube. And I was always thinking, oh, maybe I could do this. Maybe it'll be fun. So I don't know if I have shown this already, but I personally love coding. I love programming. Like, it's what I do for fun. And I figured, hey, why not try to make some money out of it? So I started a channel, and some of these actually ended up becoming surprisingly popular. So again, I haven't updated in a while, but for example, this one, Redux Toolkit with React, it got, I don't know if you guys can see this, 118,000 views. So this one kind of like blew up. Oh, I don't want to start that here. Why is there, oh, that's ads, sorry. Let me go back. So this one actually got so big. When I made this was Redux. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Redux. It's a global state management library for React. And they came out a while ago, something to simplify Redux. It was called Redux Toolkit. It's pretty much old news now, but back then it was very new. And I decided to jump into that. I dove deep into the documentation, played around with it a lot, and came out with this, how long is this? 3-hour video. And it ended up becoming very popular to the point where the lead maintainer of Redux reached out to me, and we had a lot of back and forths about things. So that was pretty fun. So to answer your question, just for fun, I would love to go back to do it time to time. Unfortunately, right now, with the new kid, the school and work, I don't have too much time right now.
Okay, that's interesting, Justin. So since you spoke about motivation for starting a YouTube channel, I have another question about your motivation. So what motivated you or inspired you to pursue that career path? And maybe it's something or some person. So what made you follow that path?
So to answer that question, I kind of want to give a little, like a short story of how I came to be here. And it starts all the way when I was like 12 years old. So I have a few other websites open here. This is pretty embarrassing. Don't judge me. But here is a free website that is still surprisingly up. When was this? 2002. Like it says 2002 here. I don't know if you guys see this, but this is super long time ago, right? More than 20 years ago. So I was in 6th or 7th grade. I played a lot of games back then. There was this game called Diablo 2 and Warcraft 3. I'm sure some of you guys are familiar with it. And we had these things where you would join clans to play with other people. So it's an online game. You would play with other people, and you would kind of form teams and a community behind it. I ended up joining this clan here. I didn't start this. It's called the Clan God, Guardians of Darkness. very cheesy. But again, I was 12 and 13 years old, so please forgive me about that. But I ended up joining this clan, and I ended up like, I didn't study back then. All I did was play games and be part of this community. And I got so involved with it that I ended up taking over this clan. So this is hosted on a free website, and in order to lead, quote unquote, lead this clan, I had to learn HTML and all that stuff. So I just ended up fidgeting around with it. I also remember, like, back then, YouTube wasn't really a thing, I don't think. There wasn't much online tutorials. So I ended up going to like a bookstore, telling my mother to buy me a bunch of like HTML books. And I remember learning how to code websites through that. And this actually ended up becoming quite popular, where I asked my mom for her credit card to have my own website. So this, again, is hosted on a free website. I ended up using my mom's website. This is the Wayback Machine. I ended up buying theclangod.com, and I ended up making this website. So this is back from 2002. I think it's around October 2002. It looks very, I don't know, to me, it still looks good. I'm pretty proud of what I did back then. But I remember like stressing out on how to do all this. And I remember HTML is something that I got pretty comfortable with at the age. But back then, all of our backend stuff was on PHP, which is admittedly not as popular anymore, although it's still widely used. I remember like looking at all those loops on the books. I'm like, oh man, this is too hard for me. So that was my limitation of being a 13-year-old. But so this is how I got started. I ended up going to high school. I stopped playing games so much, so I stopped programming for a while. And then I got into college. I went to UCLA. I studied physics and math. And on the side, I decided to take a couple of programming courses. So I remember taking 1 or 2 courses, and all those memories of me loving programming came back. Like I remember making like a solitaire game or something, and I just fell in love with it. I was spending all nights doing it. And while I was going to college at that time, I remember I had a few friends who were in business. So they owned, I lived in Los Angeles at the time, and there's a bunch of apparel companies in Los Angeles. For example, Forever 21 is there. A lot of my friends who are Korean, a lot of Koreans own, I'm Korean, by the way, and a lot of Koreans own apparel companies. And some of my friends were owners of the apparel companies. And over a few drinks, over a few dinners, we were talking about how like they need ERP solution, like a software to help manage their products. And every single ERP solutions, by the way, for those that don't know, it's called Enterprise Relational Planning. I forgot what it was. If you guys have attended last week's talk, I believe, or 2 weeks ago, Vilmos, he's an ERP expert, so he talked more about that. But anyways, pretty much it manages their invoice, their inventory, and all that stuff. It pretty much does everything in software. And they were telling me that they were frustrated with all these softwares that currently exist. Now, me being a cocky 21-year-old during that time and taking one programming class and thinking I was the best programmer in the world for some reason, I said, hey, I will make the best ERP solution for you. So I started my first maybe 4 or 5 years of quote unquote professional industry was starting my own business. I ended up making an ERP solution for these apparel companies to use. And that's how I made my income, maybe the first 4 or 5 years. So what was it? I ended up using this platform called FileMaker. It's not like a typical JavaScript or C++, all that. It's kind of like a drag and drop application, but there is still some scripting involved. So I didn't refer to any like YouTube videos at that time. I just bought a bunch of books and I just ended up creating that business. So yeah, that's pretty much how I got into the industry.
All right, that's very great. Thank you for sharing. To the viewers, if anyone has any questions, please leave them in the chat box in the Q&A section. And yeah, we'll answer your questions maybe during the interview or at the end of the interview.
Well, that's really inspiring to listen to all your story and how like all your love for programming led to this career. So now after all of that experience, like, okay, you what made you interested in pursuing the computer science degree at the University of London?
Yeah, so I started this comp sci degree at University of London last semester. So this is currently my second semester. And there's a lot of reasons for why I started. One thing I didn't mention when I started my business while attending UCLA was I got so confident in my business during the time that I thought I didn't need a degree. So, true story. Last semester, when I had one class left to graduate college, I ended up dropping out. I was like, I was very stupid back then. I was inspired by like Steve Jobs and all those other people who dropped out. I thought I was gonna be one of them. Please don't do that. Anyone listening into this, it won't work out too well for you. Just finish the degree. It'll help you a lot. But so I dropped out. So I don't actually have a college degree. So that was one of my reasons. Not that once you're in the industry, I've been in the industry for maybe like almost 10 years now. College degrees doesn't mean that much, but still some companies require it. And that's when it kind of becomes a headache for me. So that was one of my reasons. Another reason is I like studying. I really enjoy studying. I was studying on my own a lot during my free time, and I figured why not just get a degree out of it, especially a degree such as UoL where I could stay at home. I don't have to go somewhere to take the classes. I don't have to study like non-computer science related classes like English or history. So I think this fit me really well. Another reason was I ended up having 2 kids, and me and my wife were very passionate about education. And she was always saying, how are you going to inspire them to study if you yourself dropped out? So I was like, okay, I'll get a degree. Not only that, I'm interested in getting a graduate degree right now. It might change in the future, but obviously to get a graduate degree, you probably want an undergrad degree. So those are one of many reasons.
Yeah, and another question follow education. So your experience at UCL learning maths and physics, has that been helpful for you in your career as a professional or while studying computer science here?
So let me answer the second part first. Has it helped me in my University of London classes so far? Last semester, I took discrete math, computational math, foundations of computer science, and ITP1. So for those familiar, 3 of those classes are very math heavy. So it helped me a ton for those classes. I have pretty extensive math background, so it was pretty like easy for me to go back to it. So yes, definitely it helped me at University of London. I think those 3 classes, some people say they're one of the harder ones, but for me, like it was not only enjoyable because that's why I majored in it to begin with a long time ago, but it was it was more of a review for me. So yes, it helped me in that. Now, did it help me in my professional experience? And that's a little bit harder to answer. So I'm a web developer. I'm a web engineer, specifically a front-end engineer. And there's a lot of memes online like, oh, why do we study math? Why does computer science students study math when there's no math in the industry? And in certain aspects, that's true. I think the most complicated math I used in my professional work experience was like trigonometry. And that's when I had to deal with like graphs. So that's pretty much it. And you can look it up, right? Like you can look it up. You don't have to memorize it. But I think my physics and math background helped me in a little bit more not so obvious ways. So one thing I'm pretty confident in, and I could go about in detail later, is I'm very good at algorithms. When it comes to interviews and they ask me like all those data structure algorithms, like I'm very confident I could just answer on the spot. So one thing that my studies in physics and math perhaps helped me to do is it helped me to think logically. It helped me to like break down a question into piece by piece and think about it in a logical step in my head. And because of that, I think a lot of times I'm able to do those interviews really well. And not only interviews, whenever I have to come up with a solution for my work, I'm known to be pretty quick and fast in my execution and delivering the results. And I think maybe my studies in physics and math growing up helped me a lot in those areas.
We have a question. We have a question in the Q&A from Daniel. He says, What is your opinion on the University of London bachelor's degree for computer science? Is it any good, or is it a good degree or a bad degree? What are your thoughts on it?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of ways to like, what's the criteria, qualifications, whether it's a good degree or a bad degree. In terms of, is it Harvard? Is it like Stanford? I don't think so. I think we can all agree that it's not Harvard or Stanford, right? And especially like if you're Korean like me, who are crazy about education, like if you don't go to Harvard or Stanford, like you're a failure. So in that criteria, maybe it's not so much of a good degree, right? But practically speaking, what is it? Companies. I worked in maybe like 2 or 3 companies so far outside of my own business. They don't care too much about what school you go to, as long as you have a degree for the most part. So in that sense, it satisfies that very well. And especially if you are in a situation like me where you have kids and you have a day job and everything, for me, like it fits to my schedule perfectly. So for me, it's like the most perfect thing. Obviously, there are some hiccups with this university, like the administration, they could be improved and things like that. And maybe some of the classes could be improved. But I always saw education, like school, as a starting off point. What I mean by that is, even when I was attending UCLA, studying math and physics there, you guys probably know that UCLA is one of the top universities in the United States, at least. Even when I was attending there, every time I was taking a class, I would buy 3 or 4 textbooks on the side to supplement that class. So was it because the UCLA is not good enough? No, I don't think so. I think depending on how driven you are, you should always seek to, like for me, my drive is to always learn the topic as much as I can. And I'm never going to be satisfied with just the material that they give you. So I always have several other textbooks or like YouTube videos or Coursera, other classes on hand that I'm also studying with. So as long as you have that mindset, that you have the mindset that this college is not going to give you every single knowledge in the world, which I don't think any college does, especially if you're in a situation like me where you have a busy life and everything, I think it's a very good way, a very good degree.
Justin, I have a sub question related to what you mentioned, that you studied physics and math, and it's a little bit silly question, but I'm curious about your opinion, because in this era of AI, so many people say that AI will replace software engineers, but many math teachers, at least in those that I know, say that the only profession that won't be replaced is like theoretical mathematician or physicist. So what do you think about that?
Oof. Okay, so I probably should know more about AI than I do know. I know that AI has becoming a really big thing the past few years. I've been just so busy, I didn't dive deep into it as much as I wanted to. So having said that, let's see. I don't think. Let me answer that question with the most what's relevant to us right now. I don't think AI is going to replace software engineers, at least in the next, I will say, 20 years. Because there are too many, the business requirements, when you join a company and you look at all the business requirements, I think there's just too many moving pieces for AI to solve that. Now, AIs might replace a lot of simpler web applications and websites. But in terms of, especially like if you're working at a company like Amazon, like I do, it's just way too complicated for AIs to handle. Now, again, I don't have too much background in AI, so I might be full of it right now and just talking nonsense. I could be wrong, but based on my experience, and will AI be able to replace maybe like 50 years, AI will replace everything and maybe except physics and math? To that, I think I agree. Let's assume that in 50 years, like we have got peak AI. Knowing what I do know, again, not too much on AI and machine learning and everything, it gets existing data points and uses that to infer the answer. But the way that, for example, Einstein has come up with the theory of relativity, it wasn't really using pre-existing data. He had a very crazy imagination, and he was imagining like, what if I wrote a photon, a piece of light, like a horse? Like, what would I see? Like this type of imagination and thinking, AI, I don't think will do that anytime soon. And that type of thing it's using information that doesn't exist yet. For example, Newton, when he came up with theory of gravity, nothing like that existed, but it was a brand new thought. So I don't think AIs will be able to do those type of things. So maybe there is some partial truth to whoever said the statement that you just have mentioned.
Oh, well, really interesting. Well, moving on to another topic. So, stage. So, to land the job that you have now at Amazon, how did the process go in your experience? Could you share step by step what the stages were?
Yeah, so it was 2.5 years ago. I remember I was looking for a lot of jobs at the time, and even with like I've been in the industry for like 8 years, I still hate interviews. It's one of the most stressful things in the world. Not this interview, but like actual looking for job interviews. Like I freaking hate it. I remember I was looking for a new job at that moment. I applied to a bunch of places. A recruiter reached out to me on LinkedIn and asked me about, do you want to work at Amazon? Obviously, I said yes. So the first part was a phone call interview. I think they were just screening me. They asked me a couple like algorithm questions on the phone call, but not too deep, which I answered pretty well. Then the second part is meeting with one of the engineers, and I had quote unquote like a whiteboard session virtually. He asked me to like come up, make a game, like a Connect 4, and then expand upon it. So to that, I think I still did pretty good. And then the hard part is you have to like reserve 6 or 7 hours of your time, and you have like 5 or 6 interviews back to back. So, and each of these interviews are with different engineers, and it lasts about an hour each. And this is like excruciating because like for like 6-7 hours afterwards, like you feel like a zombie. They also have you prepare for the interviews. Obviously, you got to know your data structures and algorithms. Although the more experience you have, the less important they become. But you should still know about them. Amazon also has this thing called leadership principles. Give me a second. One second. And I think this is pretty important, especially if you're looking to apply a company as big as Amazon. This might be useful to you guys. Give me a second. Let me share my screen. There we go. All right. So Amazon is very big on what's called leadership principles. Let me just read what it says here. Let me zoom in a little bit more. We use our leadership principles every day, whether we're discussing ideas for new projects or deciding on the best way to solve a problem. It's just one of the things that makes Amazon peculiar. So this is a very big thing in Amazon. And when they say we use these principles every day, whether discussing ideas or whatnot, like this is actually true, at least in my team. And there are a couple principles that is listed, like customer obsession, ownership, event and simplify, and so on. You guys could read this, just Google Amazon leadership principles later. But the point that I'm trying to make is after my second interview with Amazon, when they told me I will go to the next round, I started doing my research on how the Amazon interview process is like. I started watching YouTube videos. I started watching like reading articles on people's past experience. And one of the things that they said was to study the leadership principles. Each of these examples here, each of these principles here, I came up with 2 examples on my past experience on where I have shown that I am customer obsessed, on where I have shown ownership on the project. So I prepare myself for this like tremendously by doing those. So one takeaway here, I would say, it doesn't have to be about Amazon. I'm sure Google has their own way of doing interviews, such as and Microsoft and all those other companies. Research. Don't just blindly go into the interview. Don't just do leak code and think that you're done. Look into what they are looking for. So that's what I did. And true enough, during the 6-hour interviews, they did ask me like questions like, give me an example on when you took ownership. And I would have to give an example of that. They also asked me a lot of algorithm questions. Some of the questions I didn't do so well, and I thought I wouldn't get the job. And before the interview, I also applied to a lot of other places where I didn't hear back from, so I was very discouraged. So I thought I wouldn't get the Amazon job either, but somehow, I don't know, maybe they made a mistake on their system or something, but they ended up hiring me.
Okay, that's interesting. Just mentioned only hard parts of the interview process. So is there any part that was potentially enjoyable, or at least when you finish the interview, you realize that you got the job, and then you say, well, maybe it wasn't that hard. Maybe this part was good. Maybe you figured out that you learned something, and yeah.
Enjoyable. So I feel like I'm only stressing on the hard parts. So there are enjoyable moments. It could be both enjoyable and hard. There are some times, I remember specifically in one of my interviews at Amazon, there was this extremely hard question. Like, and I have never seen that type of question before. I can't go into details about it, but it's front end related, and like it's mind-bogglingly hard. I somehow was able to just solve it on the spot, and I felt myself as I'm typing, I'm screen sharing and typing up the code. Like I feel this sometimes when I don't know if any of you guys like go to the gym, but sometimes you're in the zone, right? Like you could add one more rep. Like that's how I felt. Like I could keep on going. And maybe I was imagining it, but I could see the interviewer like on the other screen, like he was impressed. Like he's like, dang, this guy knows how to code. So after that interview, I felt like a superstar. So that's the good part. Now the opposite side is sometimes I do really bad. I remember I had an interview with Uber one time, and maybe I drank too much coffee that day, or maybe I was just too tired. But like the most simplest thing, I couldn't like. I remember I was trying to debug an application, and I had a Google Chrome open like this, and they were asking me to fix the problem. The problem was staring at me in the face, kind of like this. I don't know if you guys can see this right here, but like, there's an error. Like, please look at this line. There's an error here. That's all I had to do. But for some reason, I was looking at this. This didn't come to my eye. So I paused the interview. So sometimes that happens too. So both enjoyable and just frustrating.
Not only the good ones, but also the bad things. Okay, so there were some interviews in the past where you were not able to land the job. You're telling us. So what did you learn about yourself that you needed to improve to become better in terms of hard and soft skills after that?
Yeah. So I remember not when I was applying for Amazon 2.5 years ago, maybe like 5 years ago when I was applying. The only experience I had at that time was my own business, which, by the way, like I could go into detail later. Although I have like 9+ years of experience on paper, I don't consider my 4 or 5 years running the business, making ERP software as too helpful in my professional experience, mainly because I worked on my own and I wasn't able to learn from other people. So I kind of don't count those years of experience. But anyways, besides the point, so I was applying for jobs after that. I didn't have too much experience working with other people and working with like industry standards and things like that, because I was just coming up with my own solutions. And I ended up getting interviewed by Google at that time. And some of the questions that they have asked me was questions that you could only know if you have worked in the industry. So, and by the way, the job that I was applying for, it wasn't for a fresh grad. It was for someone with some years experience. So obviously they're going to ask you questions that shows whether you do have years of experience or not. So because I worked on my own, I didn't encounter those everyday situations that professional software developers encounter. So I wasn't able to answer it. On the hindsight, I don't want to tell you guys what the question was, but on hindsight, like it's super simple. Like I could answer it right now super easily. So I guess the point that was like a realization for me. And as I actually started working with other people and other experts and professionals, I started realizing just how valuable it is to work with other people, to not just work on your own or to work on a bad team that doesn't really have a good team, work good other engineers. I am the engineer I am today because of the mentors and the seniors that I had under me, that not under me, but over me. They really made me the engineer that I am today. And so even now, if I join a new company and I feel like there's no one I can learn from, like I will look for another company because I'm always looking to grow. So there's that. Let's see. What else? Getting a lot of rest. That's important. As I mentioned before, like sometimes like I was just too tired. I couldn't answer the simplest things. I also think that what's very important and maybe not talked about often is having a good support system around you. So as I mentioned before, when I was applying for Amazon, I applied to a bunch of other places. And because I had a couple of years of experience at that moment, like I actually applied to a couple notable places like Uber, Postmates, Snapchat. And some of these places I did bad, like the Uber one, as I explained. Some of these places I ended up doing really well. Like Snapchat, I feel like my interview, like it couldn't have gone better. But for some reason, they still rejected me, which was very frustrating. So just looking for a new job can be a very frustrating and like it takes so much energy out of you. If I didn't have my wife at that time, who always encouraged me and saying, "It's okay. I know you. You're a good engineer. That you'll end up finding a job at the right place." If I didn't have the encouragement, like I probably wouldn't have given up and haven't even done the Amazon interview.
Okay, that's interesting, Justin. So you mentioned many things, and I think that some of our viewers might be motivated or inspired to follow that career path, but probably some of them don't have any experience. And is there any advice that you would like to give them, like to avoid mistakes that maybe you made or maybe that other people, your colleagues, co-workers made? So you probably noticed what are common mistakes, and like you can pass that knowledge to future generations of software engineers.
Yeah. So the first mistake that I want to mention again, that I've mentioned a couple times before, is the first team that you join. I would highly encourage, don't look at the salary per se, although that is still important. Make sure you find a team where tech is respected, where it's not an afterthought, and also you have good engineers over you. Because truly they will define what type of engineer you become moving forward. So just to give some background, I told you guys for like 4 or 5 years, I had my own business. I mainly worked on my own. Maybe I became a good like an algorithm or problem solver during that time, but I didn't get the professional industry standard, those type of knowledge. So I was pretty new in that regard. And the first full-time job I got after that was at a very small startup in Los Angeles. Very small. It was like kind of like the office was kind of a hole in the wall. And I was so desperate at that time because it was so hard for me to find a job that I ended up taking it. That actually ended up becoming very good for me long term because the team lead of that company happened to be like, I don't know, maybe some of you guys know him. His name is The New Boston on YouTube. He has like 2.6 million followers. Let me see. Boston. Yeah, so he's not so active anymore, but he's like 2.66 million followers. So this guy was a team lead at the small startup that I was in. So I didn't know at the time. I also didn't know about him. But supposedly, if you Google him, like he's very famous. But I learned tremendously, not only from him, but also the lead front-end engineer that was in that company. I worked with them for about 2 years. I ended up working with the owner of this channel. Is called Bucky. I ended up working with him on a couple other projects later, even after we both left the company. But they really shaped the type of engineer I have become. First of all, they're both him and my lead front-end engineer and my company, they were super passionate about coding. Like we will be talking about coding, we will be making coding jokes. and always just like diving deep on how to best architect things. And it's through those conversations where I became better. The 2 years I would say the 2 years I have worked at this company with these people, I learned so much more, maybe like 100 times more than working on my own or working with a few other people. So it accelerated my growth tremendously. Not only that, even at Amazon right now, like I have senior engineers over me who like I highly respect, who like are complete geniuses, and they are the ones that help me become a better engineer day by day. So I would say an important thing is make sure you're at the right company, because it will really dictate where you go in the future. For example, I had a friend whose first job was at a very small company without any other senior engineers over him. He was a tremendous in terms of like how to code. He was very good. He was a very smart guy. But because of his first experience in the industry, he got discouraged. Now he works at some other job. So I hope that doesn't happen to anyone here. Make sure you find the right place in the beginning.
Okay, thank you for answering. Sebastian, maybe you have another question about this.
So, okay, about landing, now let's move on to landing the job. So once you got the job and passed the interview, so well, when you actually landed the job, how was it for you to integrate yourself in terms of technical skills you had at the time?
Yeah, so I think it'll be more insightful if I answer this question with my first non-business full-time job with the Bucky, the new Boston guy that I shared with you guys just now. So when I got that job, when I was interviewing, I was learning React. During my previous years of experience, I didn't do any web development. So I learned web development quickly on my own, and I was learning React at the time when I got the interview. So I wasn't a React developer, but somehow I landed the job as a front-end React developer while I was still taking Udemy courses on React. So obviously I wasn't too good. And I was very, very bad, actually, the first few months. It got to the point where, like, first of all, my life day-to-day was hell, because I could see that, like, other people think that I'm bad, which is never a good feeling, right? I would also go home every day, like, to study, because the course that I was taking, like, I didn't even finish. I had to finish that first. And I had a few other courses that I wanted to study. It got so bad that the first month, after like the first 1 or 2 months, the CEO of the company, he told me to come to his office, and he told me, your level of output is not what we have expected from like a non-junior role here. You're getting paid too much. I'm gonna cut your salary by, what was it, like 1,000 each month. If you're not happy with that, you could feel free to leave, but that's what it is. And hearing that from the CEO, first of all, I got super pissed. But I also couldn't complain because I knew that my output was very bad. So I made a deal with the CEO, like, what if in 1 month I show a fast improvement? Like, could I go back to my original salary? And he said, yeah, if in 1 month the other people say you do good, then yes. So that 1 month, like, I was coding nonstop. I had this like this anger in me to prove to everyone that I am like who they hired me. So I ended up proving myself during that 1 month. And it was actually during that time when I got the respect of my senior engineers, and we became fast friends. I started learning from them. So it was very hard. And I hope that none of you guys go through the experience that I went through of getting your salary lowered and just have meeting with the CEO like that. I don't think it was really right for him to do that, but whatever. So when I got that job, people talk about like work-life balance or anything. I think it's more of like you want to study and try really hard, or even if it means to study on your own time or at home, because you want to be in the industry. For me, I wanted to be in the industry. I wanted to be a web developer. My business, I closed it. I needed a full-time job, and I was looking at my career in web development long-term. So for me, it was more about like I will do whatever it takes to get that. And that few months of working really hard, it did pay off. Because like, if it wasn't for that, I would probably not be at Amazon here today. So just try very hard. Make sure whatever technologies you guys are using at the company that you signed up for, like you become good at those technologies, whether it be React, whether it be some backend framework, etc.
Yeah, interesting. So you told us that showing initiative is valued and respected by your coworkers and probably in the rest of the industry. But yeah, you said that at that moment you were kind of driven by anger, and that was your approach to learning new skills, right? So, but now since you have more experience, I'm curious. So how did your like strategies for learning new skills evolve? So how did that change over time?
Yeah. So as I have said, I enjoy learning new things, and I like challenging myself. If I have to do the same thing over again day by day, like I would much rather be doing something else. I get bored. So one thing good about going up in level, especially if you join a company like Amazon, where they have different levels for what type of engineer you are, right? You're a lead or you're this or that. I got myself to a place where I am now able to lead projects for the team that I work with. And there are other engineers too in my team that could lead projects. But for me, I'm kind of selfish. I talk to my manager and I tell him any new interesting project that comes to our team's way, I tell him like, give that to me, because that will be an opportunity for me to learn new technologies. That will be an opportunity for me not to do the mundane stuff. So all the projects a lot of times end up coming to me. So that's what I do. I take, just as you said, I take the initiative. I don't wait for things to get handed to me, because then you always get handed the prep, right? The bad stuff. So I take initiative to make sure I'm not working on the mundane things. And how I learn, it depends on the company you work for. For example, if you work at a company like Amazon, we have a repo, like we pretty much have our own GitHub. That's private, obviously, only for Amazon employees. And there's like million lines of code in there. What I do is I see how other teams has approached a problem that I'm trying to tackle. So I look at their code base. I try to get examples out of it. I always try to stay up to date on, like, there are a few engineers that I follow on Twitter, for example, and I see what they have to say. For example, if we're talking about Redux, the guy who I ended up talking with after my video got popular on Redux, I look at his Twitter timeline to see if there's any updates on new best approaches to things. So that's how I stay up to date on new technologies, and how I always push myself to be in a place where I am learning new stuff.
That's interesting. Something that you mentioned is that, well, you now have the chance to choose your projects and what you work on. So is there any favorite project that you have worked on that you really and would you like to share with us?
Yeah, so I do have a couple. In terms of the most like obvious thing, let's see. Let me actually talk about this. With Bucky, the new Boston, the 2.6 million YouTuber that I told you guys, who was my team lead at my first company, we, although it's not active anymore, we ended up making like a open source cryptocurrency just for fun. And he wanted me to be the lead front end for that project. So although it's not active anymore, we ended up having like tens of thousands of users at one point. And because it was open source, we literally had like hundreds of developers on GitHub pushing changes. So I was in charge of overseeing all the front end aspects. And one thing we did for that project was we made a desktop application using Electron. I don't know if any of you guys are familiar with Electron. It's called Electron.js. And pretty much it allows you to create desktop applications pretty easily. And you are able to integrate it with things like React. So we made what I personally think was a decent desktop application that shows your wallet balance. You're able to make transactions, shows you your history. So that was pretty fun. And Electron, I've never worked with Electron prior to that, so it was all a new experience too. So that was fun. Another thing that's really fun for me now, although it may sound boring on paper, is right now I am leading on a big refactor to our Amazon code base. We are shifting from like sort of like a mono repo where the whole app is like in one code base to a bunch of micro apps to make it much more easily manageable, so that it's more scalable, so that when we have to make changes, it's easier to do. So I'm leading that whole endeavor right now. At Amazon, things are pretty formal in how we do things. So before you start a new project, you have to come up with design documents, and pretty much everyone has to get on the same page before you start the project. So I ended up doing a lot of research a couple of months back and coming up with a bunch of design documents, and the team agreed on my approach. So that's what we're doing now. It's fun because the things that I have proposed, I don't know 100% if it's gonna work, right? Like it might not work based on the limitations that we have on our team. Like every code base you work with, there are some limitations that you got to work around, right? Like one thing at Amazon, we work with literally hundreds of other teams. Our app is integrated in a bigger ecosystem where other teams also have their applications in them. So we have to make sure it works around those limitations. So I have come up with a proposal, and I am slowly seeing right now, day to day, that it's working out. So that's always good to see. That my theory is not just a theory, that it's actually practical.
Yeah, that's really good to hear. And you mentioned that usually co-workers and bosses, they positively respond to showing initiative and to trying to push things forward. But is there any situation when they deny your initiative, and how do you deal with that? And maybe you can mention that and like some other important qualities for a software engineer, because that is also probably part of the job.
Yeah. So of course you should always, even if you take initiatives, you should do it with respect. You should also, it will help if you have a history of delivering in the past. Like let's say you have failed every single things that you have done in the past, they're probably not going to give it to you in the future, right? So make sure you take on things that you are able to. I don't know if I'm answering your question, but I do remember now when I first joined Amazon, I was trying to take initiatives as much as possible. One project that my manager gave me, I ended up botching completely because of my lack of knowledge in the Amazon ecosystem. And that was very sobering to me. So that also made me like, think before you just take on something blindly, right? I was always thinking like, oh, I'll just figure it out on the way. But sometimes some things like you just need the experience. And now what I talk with my manager on the day-to-day is he wants me to work on my leadership skills. I am leading projects, but many times what I end up doing, my comfort zone is working on my own. Like I used to have a nickname in my previous company. My nickname was Bustin' Justin because I used to bust tickets, like finish tickets left and right. Like I'm very fast. I'm very good at writing code fast. And even at Amazon right now, like that's what I'm known for. Like we have yearly reviews where your coworkers say good and things that are good about you and things that you could improve on. And my pods are always like, he's freaking fast. So that's like my quote unquote superpower, as we call it at Amazon. But because of that trait that I have, I end up doing a lot of things on my own, like myself. So what my manager is telling me now is learn how to train other people so that they could do the work that you do, so that although my actual coding may decrease, the overall productivity of the team will increase tenfold. Because if I could train like maybe like 5-6 other engineers to do the things that I do, or maybe even not as fast, but that's okay. It's still much faster delivery than as opposed to me doing on my own. So that's something that I'm working on. And it's very uncomfortable for me right now. I like working on my own. I don't like telling people what to do. Like that's very stressful for me. And especially like if they're not getting it, like that could get very frustrating for me. But I'm trying to get out of my comfort zone and learn that area, because one, obviously that's one important skills you need to know how to do as you grow in your software engineering job. And for me, like if I want to get a promotion, those are the things that I have to be working for. So that's what I'm trying to do. not go to my default go-to of just coding, getting everything done on my own, but like kind of taking a step back and leading and helping other people do that stuff.
Really interesting. Well, something you said is like at the beginning you were trying to pick, as many projects as you can and showing that initiative. But sometimes you found out that maybe you still didn't have the skills or you had to learn more. And with experience, well, now you're able to take those tasks. So what would you say are the most important qualities for a software engineer?
There's a lot of important qualities, right? So I can't name one. Taking initiative is one, obviously. Clear communication is one, I would say. If you have an idea, you should be able to convince others that your idea, that your approach is the most optimal approach. And that does require communication skills. Because at many times I do have a good idea, but if I just tell them I'm gonna do it this way, they're like, no, that's stupid. Like, why would you do that? But if I could explain myself why, and many times that is very difficult to do because there's a lot of moving pieces in software, right? That's also important. I would say one thing important is just having general social skills. You don't have to be the most popular guy in the team. You don't have to be the funniest, but just make sure that you are easy to get along with, because that always makes things easier, right? Like I get along with my senior engineers and my coworkers. The ones who have better social IQ, I would say, like I tend to spend more time with them naturally, right? That's only natural. And that in turn makes them learn from me, which will give them more opportunity to learn from me, and so on. So it will only help you to do that. Now, to how to learn that, I don't know. That's probably some other interview that you guys gotta do with someone more expert in the area. Make sure you're good. Make sure you're good at the technologies that you guys use on a day-to-day basis. For example, I am not the highest ranked engineer in my team. There are people higher than me, but when it comes to React and when it comes to TypeScript, I think they would acknowledge that I am one of the leading experts in those two technologies. And so even if they have questions, they come to me. So make sure you have something to contribute and make sure you are good. Try to work on your skills to get good. So 2 years before this, right, I was telling you guys that I sucked at React. I was learning at the time. I was able to develop my skills to the point where lead engineers at Amazon respect my skills and come to me for help if they are stuck on something. So if that is possible for me, that will be possible for you. So make sure you're good at what you do. And at Amazon in particular, we have so much code base in the Amazon org. And many times what ends up happening is projects get moved to other teams. Like I might be working on this one project, this one app, but because of changing business requirements, we might have to give this project to some other team. So this other team is now going to be working on a code base that they have never touched before, or the vice versa. Some other team was managing a code base and now it's given to us. That happens time to time. So what's very important in Amazon, especially, is having the wisdom and the knowledge to architect a code base in a way that it's resistant to code rot, to make sure that it's flexible enough to change to future business requirements, clean enough so that other teams can take it over, and that it is pretty intuitive on how the code is run. There are many code bases that are like completely incomprehensible except to the original authors. If your code base becomes like that, and even if you're the best engineer in the world or you're the best in the world, without care, it will become like that. Make sure you are always going back to it and refining it, refactoring it to kind of keep it tidy and neat. So that is something that many engineers are too lazy to do. But not only will it help, you have more changes on your user account. Like for example, at Amazon, this is a very small thing that comes to your promotion, but we have code stats, like how many we call it PRs in GitHub, right? How many PRs do you have? How many changes do you have committed? Not very important, but still a consideration. If you end up doing these refactors, making your code cleaner in your time when you don't really have much projects in between projects, it will help with that. But not only that, other people around you will be appreciative of you doing that. So making sure that you don't get lazy, making sure that you keep the code up to date, constantly refactoring it, things like that.
Yeah, but following up on that, on messy code, there's this quote that it says, it's harder to read code than to write it. In your experience as a software engineer, is that true or false?
That's 100% true. Many times, like, because I know that I'm pretty fast at writing things, like I just want to like, if I get a new code base, I just want to write it from scratch. Obviously, that's not always practical, and you shouldn't do that always, although sometimes you should. But it is 100% true. It's harder to read code than to write code, which is why all the more reason to make it as clean as possible.
So I think this is a natural sub question for that. So what do you think? How important is commenting code and writing clear documentation? And is it possible to do it all the time? So maybe sometimes it is not really necessary to put too much effort into that.
It depends on the code that you're working on. So let me answer that question in a way that might controversially not completely align with the way that UoL teaches things, right? But I'm just gonna speak my honest truth. So first of all, documentation. If you have a code base that is constantly evolving and changing, it is very hard to keep the documentation up to date. And so what ends up happening many times, especially with tight deadlines, is the documentation is out of date. So it becomes more of a source of confusion than a help. So documentations are not always required. However, we do have at Amazon, I've started a couple projects that are quote unquote libraries, like libraries that you could download on NPM. Obviously, it's not on NPM. It's just libraries that my team and my sister teams use. For these type of libraries, documentation is very important. It's also very rare that the business requirements will change where the documentation needs to be drastically updated. So those things you should have documentation, in my opinion, and make it as easy as possible. One of the criteria I do, and I always push on my teammates, is my mother should be able to go on this computer. As long as she can read English, she should be able to follow these steps and do it like that. Like that's my criteria. So in those sense, documentation is good. About comments in code. If you look through most of my code base, there's almost no comments anywhere. And that is because in my opinion, code base should be self-document. Most of it should be the code itself should be the documentation, should be the comments. It should be clear enough where you don't need comments. Because again, comments are very hard to keep up to date, especially with a rapidly changing code base. The only times where we and my coworkers would add comments if something is just super complicated, where you can't really read the code and understand what it's trying to do. That's the only time where comments are necessary, in my opinion. But I also do want to emphasize that my code base is not in JavaScript. We use TypeScript. So for example, a lot of the parameter types and arguments, what type of arguments that they receive, the TypeScript documents those already. So TypeScript is very good. And in my opinion, these days, if you're going to be working with JavaScript, you have to know TypeScript.
Okay, I think that sums up pretty well. So just before we proceed to the next section of our questions, I would like to remind our viewers to ask questions in Q&As, and then all of them will be answered in the end. So yeah, Sebastian, would you like to ask the next question?
Yes, of course. So moving on to the work ethic and work-life balance section of this interview. So how many hours a week do you spend coding versus doing other tasks like planning or a project or having meetings with other coworkers or your bosses?
When I first joined Amazon, I did end up getting promoted once last year. The higher you go, the less this ratio becomes less and less against coding. So the higher of an engineer you become, the less time you spend time coding. So I would say right now, it's at about 50-50 for me. As according to the Amazon scale, I'm a mid-level engineer right now. I'm a L5, we call it L5. So for someone like me, I would say it's about 50-50. But now as I work hard to become an L6, it should slowly start going like this. Yeah. So when I first joined, it was mostly coding. Now I just have more and more meetings, and it will become like that as I progress.
So yeah, that sounds like natural progression through career. And since you have more and more meetings, you probably also have to deal with people who don't have technical background. So how do you approach discussing those technical aspects with those people?
I always have this like syndrome where I feel like an imposter many times. Maybe it's because of my unique background of not having a traditional computer science degree yet, or maybe it's because for so many years of my life, I just worked on my own and I just came up with my own terminologies and way of saying things. But like, I feel like a non-technical person many times in technical meetings. Like other teammates or other project owners will be discussing their project, and half the time I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about. So I sympathize with these non-technical people because I feel like that many times. So because of that, I naturally try to stay away from too much of jargon and technical words. Obviously, if I had to break down every little thing, that's just a big waste of time. So I think you should know your audience. Like if I'm having a meeting with other front-end engineers, I don't have to explain to them what React is every time, for example, or what JavaScript is. Know your audience, I would say, is an important thing. And I don't know if people actually do this, but if you do, I would highly discourage it. I think some people tend to use technical jargon to make themselves sound smarter, but most times it doesn't, and it makes it more frustrating, I think. I also think that the way that I always get compliments after my presentations in that how easily I've explained things, how clear I made it. And I think it's because I don't try to fabricate my speech or my talk with all these technical jargon. Because one, I hate them. And I don't want anyone else in my meetings to feel like the way that I feel many times when other teammates present their ideas.
Interesting. So, well, moving on to another question. What do you do when you're stressed about a project? And how do you handle work-related stress?
Yes. So this is still something that I work with. I usually do good under stress. Like when there's tight deadline, like that's when like I get kind of fired up. However, there are times when like it's just way too much. I do have a couple of vices that I probably shouldn't do. Like, here, let me show you guys. Can you guys see this? Energy drink. This is not so. And here's another one. This is all from today. Yeah, don't do this.
I can relate to that.
Empty. Yeah. Don't do this. I have a very bad addiction to energy drinks. Things that I've tried to do recently is exercise. I've moved recently, so you guys can't see it in the back, but I have a row machine in my other room. I have a couple of exercise equipments that I try to do, even if I don't feel like it. I try not to tackle everything on my own in terms of like, I'm not ashamed to go to people who know more than me to get information. My lead engineers that I work with, like who I respect so much, I learn so much from them. I constantly go to them. Hey, what do you think about this? Can you give me more information on this? And my general experience has been, whether at the previous company or now, because I'm taking so much initiative and I'm really like, they see that I'm learning from them, they like it when I come to them. Many times people say like, oh, don't bother us senior engineers with your junior questions. And maybe it is true if it's like a super stupid question, but at least the questions that I bring up to them, like they like it. They want me to say. It comes to a point where if I got a new project, I'm not asking them anything. They're like, hey, are you working on this? Like, what's wrong? Like, or they even sometimes say like, are you mad at me? Like, I don't know, maybe because I usually talk with them on a day-to-day basis. So don't be afraid to reach out to other people and get help and get the support that you need.
Okay, so dealing with all those situations, so can you tell me how you feel about work ethic within your area of work, and maybe you can tell us also how it differs from company to company?
Yeah. So I think I've been very fortunate in that the previous startup that I worked at and Amazon right now, a lot of people have very good work ethic. They work very hard. At the startup, let's see, there are always a few like kind of people who do the bare minimum. And in my experience, they either are the last ones to get promoted or they don't get recognized, they don't get new projects. So you should always strive to work hard. And it's generally better and just easier and more fun to work with people with good work ethic, obviously. So and it's something me based upon my background. It's like what I pride myself in. That like this is my work, right? I get paid for this. So I have high pride in my own work ethic. So I make sure that I am not lazy or I am not doing this. Yes. Now, does this mean that you should be working always in your off time? I think before I answer that, I want to mention, because I know we have an international audience. I'm very fortunate in that I work in the United States with a lot of rules and regulations. I know that in other countries it might not be the case, but I will personally never join a company where they force me to work beyond the expected 9 to 5 or 40 hours a week hours. I will never, if that is like a given, I will never work there. So for example, one of the places I was interviewing was SpaceX. I told them, hey, I have a child at home. How much am I expected to work? They were saying, oh yeah, we average here 80 hours a week. I'm like, oh heck no, like I will never do that. So that was the end of that interview. Unless they're gonna pay me, I will never go beyond. However, having said that, many times I personally end up working more than 40 hours a week for my own benefit. So for example, when I was kind of trying to prove myself in my first startup, I worked more than 40 hours a week, right? I was studying and all that stuff to get better. At Amazon, many times I would work for more than 40 hours a week because I am aiming for a promotion. And at Amazon, a promotion is a very rigorous process. You have to submit a bunch of work documents and summaries on things that you have done. You have to like prove to the management that here are all the data points as to why I am the next level. So because I wanted those data points, I would push myself. And I got the promotion last year, which was actually they were saying one of the fastest promotions that they have seen. So it worked out to my favor, right? So in those sense, I'm okay. But I would never join a company that would force me to work more than 40 hours a week out of their choice, not my choice. Yeah.
Well, really interesting. And so, yeah, you previously talked about showing initiative to your managers and those things, but now you're also telling us don't overwork yourselves, and you need to know that balance between showing initiative, but also like, well, not burning out. But you mentioned something else that really good sub question to this is like there in a company, in a team, there's always people who maybe do less or just the bare minimum. And I don't know, how do you deal with that in case you have to, like, because sometimes maybe they are in charge of some tasks and it can be frustrating that you cannot continue your work because they are not doing theirs. How is that dealt in companies, or how do you deal with that personally in your teams?
So that's something that I'm working with right now. I wish we could have someone with more experience that could answer that question, because I would like to know too. Because that's my biggest frustration right now is dealing with people like that, because those people always exist, unfortunately. what I used to do, which I don't encourage because this is not a long-term solution, was I would just end up doing their work, like just taking it over, and like be nice about, hey, I have some time, I'll take this over. But that's not scalable. You're not encouraging it to get better. And it's not always because they're lazy, right? They might be dealing with something, or maybe they're blocked by something, or maybe they're too stressed. There's a lot of reasons as to why they might be doing that. So it's not always just due to laziness, which I understand. But I've been talking with my manager about how I can improve doing that. I don't quite know, but one thing I have been doing is, instead of going to my usual few people that I always talk to about my ideas, I try to make my ideas more public, and so that they could also see what I'm thinking about. So that it's not like a little sect that we have within our team, which always causes division. I try to be more open about sharing ideas, and I ask them for their input. Another thing is, one thing that I'm coming to grips with is, people don't always have to do things my way. I always think like, oh, how come they did it like this? My way could have been better. And maybe it is better. And maybe sometimes it is worth calling it out and doing it my way. But sometimes it's not. Many times it's just more of an opinion-based thing. But for me, I have a hard time dividing those two lines. So sometimes for me, as long as it works and makes sense, like it's not like completely like it's gonna break in the future. As long as it's not that, like sometimes I'm just learning right now to just let go at times. Because I have a very like obsessive personality when it comes to the code base I work with. Like it becomes my baby, and like I get very frustrated when things that I don't like goes in there. I'm learning how to only fight the fights that are worth it, not every little minor detail. Because if I'm telling them like, oh, why did you use this variable name instead of this, like it's completely stupid stuff, although sometimes that is important, it ends up discouraging them, and like they just now they don't know what to do, right? Like anything that they think that they will do, I'm gonna have a complaint about it. I don't want them to feel like that. I want them to feel empowered to refactor and update the code base. So that's something that I'm personally learning.
Okay, Justin, that's it. Since our interview is approaching the end, so there are a few questions that we still need to ask, and I would like to ask you, because some people will probably choose this career path, and do you think that there are some maybe preconceived notions that people have, and maybe they have some unrealistic expectations of this field? So you probably noticed that through your experience. So would you like to point them out so that people can, just have realistic expectations?
Yes. So I did have a couple people from UoL reach out to me privately when they have learned that I work for Amazon, and they were saying, oh, it's their dream company. They want to land a job here after school. I would say, just statistically, it's very hard to land a paying job after college. I mean, of course, there are people that do it, but you are competing with so many computer science majors all across the world. And it will be very hard to compete with it. Not only that, right now, I don't know if you guys are aware, but there's like a big hiring freeze, like across all big tech companies, including Amazon. So right now, even the climate is not very good. For example, we had an intern last year. He was an excellent intern. We would have hired him as a full-time, but because of the hiring freeze, he didn't get the job, which is very unfortunate. So the point that I'm trying to make is, it would be great if you could get a big tech job right after college, if that is your ambition, and if you can do it, then that's great. But don't think that is the only way of getting into big tech. What's much easier to get into big tech is do something like me, where you have several years of experience under your belt, where you can answer those interview questions that shows whether you have experience or not, and enter the big tech companies, not as a fresh grad, but as someone with some years of experience, like as a mid-level engineer. I would say that's much easier to do. So that's one thing I think will be helpful to you guys, that your first job after college is not your end goal, right? It will most likely never be the end goal. Like you have a whole journey ahead of you. So don't think of it like that. Another thing is, one misconception that I hear a lot of times, that's kind of frustrating to me as someone working in the FANG companies. By the way, for those that don't know FANG, you guys all know what FANG is, right? Facebook, Amazon, Apple,
Yeah.
all these companies. Yeah. Some people told me that they don't want to work at a big tech company because they don't want to be a little cog in a machine, like because that's how they will feel. But my experience has been at Amazon. Maybe it's different for other teams, or maybe it's different for other companies. I have so much freedom at Amazon. I'm able to start so much projects, start it from scratch, come up with the ideas, come up with the design documents, and many times we go with my approach. So I have so much ways of experimenting and trying out new things. I do not feel like a cog in a machine. As a matter of fact, because Amazon is so big, we are able to do crazy things that we propose sometimes because we have the manpower, we have the resource. Whereas when I was a startup, many things that I wanted to do, we couldn't do because of the lack of resource. So it might be different based on the team that you join, but it is not true that if you join a big tech company, you're a small cognitive machine. It's not always true. Yep, those are the only two things that comes to my mind right now.
Okay, really, really interesting, because those are things I've heard before. To know what someone who's working for Amazon, what companies many people dream of, things about, these misconceptions. Yeah, it's really interesting. So, okay, another question in an ending note is like, what would you suggest and advise to a student who's just starting this journey in software engineering?
Sorry, you kind of cut off there. Could you repeat that question?
Okay, no. So, well, what would you suggest and advise to a student who's just starting this journey in software engineering?
I see. So let me do that towards more of a web development. Like, I'm gonna answer this based from my experience.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
Yes.
Your area of expertise.
Yes. Enjoy it. Know that learning never stops. For example, for me, I'm learning constantly new things. Web is so rapidly evolving that there are always new things. Especially if you want to be a front-end developer. So like there was a thread on the channel recently, like, oh, is React gonna be irrelevant 5 years from now? Like, or are these other things that take over? And many times people have this fear, like that, like if they learn some new technology, like something else will take over, which does happen time to time. But don't stress out about that so much. Research in your area what technologies are the most popular in terms of job, and get really good at that. But you don't have to learn every shiny new things that comes out. Whenever a new framework comes out, I'm not studying it. I don't have time for that. What I'm more interested these days is studying like how to make good architecture, how to write your code in a way that is scalable. These are things that apply to any technology, no matter what type of technology you use. So don't get so worked up on the language that you use. Don't get so worked up on the framework that you have to study. Just research, find one that is popular in your area, and just stick with that one. But don't get so caught up on this. And also, I just also want to say, although I don't believe this, if, for example, JavaScript becomes obsolete and some other language becomes popular in the future, although I don't think it will happen, once you have a couple of years of experience, like, it's not that hard to pick up a new language. Like, I could pick up a new language in like a day or two. Like, it's very easy because you start realizing that at the end of the day, there's these repeating patterns that happens no matter what the language is. So don't get so caught up on that. And I would say, try to find people who are as passionate as hopefully you are in programming, and try to start projects with them. Meet other people to get new ideas and learn from other people. Don't ever get to a place where you are so confident where you think you are unteachable. I personally, like, I have been a front-end lead, even at Amazon, although technically I'm not senior, I do lead most projects in my team. I'm the go-to guy in my team. I have led an open source front-end team that had more than 10,000 people. But even now, I don't consider myself to know everything. And I'm always looking for people to learn from. The learning never stops. So I don't know how you guys might take that, but for me, that's a very exciting thing. One of the things I studied, reasons why I studied physics and math a long time ago was because there were so much things to learn. I feel the exact same way with programming. The learning never stops. And to me, some that might be stressful to some people. For me, like that is a very exciting thing because that means the fun never stops. So don't think that afterwards like your studying stops. So that's the thing that I'll say.
Yeah, that's really interesting because it's true. Like, tech is an ever-changing industry. There are new things going on every day. Um, so yeah, there are so many things now, and something you said like, okay, if there's a new framework, I'm not gonna waste my time and learn it. I'm interested in other things, and there's always this thing of should I be try many things as I can, or should I make an effort to learn one thing but become really good at it? So what do you say is like the best choice, or is the balance between both? What's your thoughts on that?
I would say get real, especially if you're starting out. Let's say you want to be a front end engineer, like I am. Uh, Research in your area. What good framework? What's the most popular framework? It might be React. It might be something else, and get really good at that. Maybe do dive in, take a surface videos on things like Angular and Vue, just to see how other ways of approaching things. But get very good at React or whatever you decide to do in the beginning, because that's gonna help you land your first job. Especially for more lower mid engineering roles, how good you are at the technology matters. The higher you go, the less it matters, but especially when you want to start, that matters importantly. So I would say get good at one, maybe have a surface understanding of others, just so that you see the differences, the pros and cons, things like that.
Yeah, interesting. So you mentioned a few potential pathways for learning, but since I think that many of our viewers are from University of London, and you probably checked the curriculum for all specializations, so how would you evaluate like that web development specialization at our university? And maybe you would tailor it slightly differently, especially for beginners who are at the beginning of this journey.
Am I allowed to be honest here? I won't get in trouble afterwards. Okay. So I made a post recently. I'm on web dev right now. I'm taking the web dev course right now currently. We're on week 2. If you go to the web dev channel, you'll see that I have completed every single lectures, and pretty much the only assignments that's left is a group project, which I can't do right now. It's not sufficient to become a web developer. I think that, and this is not a problem that only plagues UoL. It's every single other college, university courses that I have seen. I will be very honest. Boot camps teach. You guys all know about web development boot camps, right? They teach much better web development than traditional universities. I have yet to come across a traditional university web development course that was sufficient. I think there's a lot of reasons as to why that is. For example, universities are very slow at adapting to change, right? It's much harder to change curriculums in universities than it is for like a boot camp or for like a Udemy course. So it's not a problem just related to University of London. It's a problem that exists, I would say, globally across all universities. Don't use that and think that you're going to become a web developer. Being a web developer naturally means that you are a good self-learner. So if you are not a good self-learner, I would highly encourage you to try to become a self-learner. And one good resource, I would say, I also want to mention this. A lot of people like free stuff, and free stuff are always good. But the problem with like a lot of free stuff, in my opinion, is they are very surface level, and they're not as detailed because they are free. So I personally see it as an investment if you end up spending like $15 on a course on Coursera. If you go to Coursera, type web development, there's a lot of popular ones. I would highly encourage you. Wait, did I say Coursera? I meant Udemy. I think I meant Udemy. Yeah. Udemy has sales all the time. I would highly encourage you, if you do want to become a web developer, get one of the more popular courses on Udemy. Don't be afraid to spend the $15 or however much they charge you on sales, because it will be worth it. As I said in the beginning, when I got my first startup job, I was learning React from Udemy at the time. I bought like 2 or 3 React courses, and that pretty much made me become the developer I am today. So it's a very good platform. And because they have these like 30-hour courses, it's not surface level, so much surface level like how YouTube is many times.
Okay, the more we speak, the more inspired I am to ask you questions, but I promise this will be the last one for me. So you mentioned that landing a job in FANG companies, especially right after graduation, is difficult to do. So, and you have experience of working in United States, but all those big companies, they have their branches all abroad, all over the world, right? So maybe while working for Amazon, maybe you heard like, is that a little bit easier to land that kind of a job in other countries, or competition is still on the same level as it is in the United States?
I don't know. I don't know. Maybe. I don't know. That's not my area of expertise. I will just say find people in your country who works for these big FANG companies and connect them on LinkedIn and ask them these questions. I have people on LinkedIn reach out to me, some random people who I've never met before. Like, hey, I want to do something similar as you. Like, what would you suggest? And a lot of people are very open to give you suggestions, I think, because generally a lot of programmers want to help other programmers.
But you probably have experience of working with Amazon's teams from other countries. So can you share anything about that experience?
Oh yeah. So right now, you guys know about like frameworks for UI, right? Like for example, Tailwind. Or there's even like what's that one? Goodness, I've been on paternity for like 5 weeks, so I didn't have much coding time for the past 5 weeks, and I feel like I forgot everything. What is Material UI? Material UI is a UI library that Google has given. At Amazon, we have a bunch of UI libraries that we use, and the UI framework that my team uses and my organization uses. I forgot which European country they are originally from, but it's somewhere in it's some European country that they are based off of. Maybe like I don't know. I don't want to butcher it, but they are excellent. They are excellent engineers. It's not so. One thing I would say, and there are a few other teams that we work with from other countries. So it's not just America that has the best engineers. I see excellent engineers for all across the world from the people that we work with.
Okay, and just one more. Sorry. So just to end on a funny note is like, so what is the language, the first language that you're going to teach your kids? Programming language?
JavaScript.
Okay.
All right, so that was the end of the question set. There is one question from the Q&A section, but that was already answered in the interview, but I'll just read it right now. Alberto says, can you tell us a little more about how you ended up working at Amazon and how you actively looked for jobs at a FANG company and your experience with it overall, and the screening process, but that was already mentioned before. And Divya is now asking if you could take a look at IBM Full Stack Software Developer Professional Certificate on Coursera and give your opinion whether which one is better. Should you do it?
Let me I did answer the first part, but I wanted to mention this. One thing that I do notice a lot of people, especially fresh grads, do is they don't know how to market themselves. So in way that their LinkedIn is structured, way that they write a resume. If there's a platform for me to do this, like I would love to share my resume on what I gave Amazon, and you guys could see and things that I wrote. Maybe that could be an inspiration for other people. But everything, like, you have to market yourself. You have to learn how to sell yourself. So for example, like if I'm looking for a new girlfriend, like I'm married, so I'm never gonna look for a girlfriend anytime soon. But like I'm not gonna tell them, hey, I live in my mother's basement. Like I'm not gonna write that. But many times I read people's resume and it sounds like that. Like your own parents probably don't want to hire you with that type of resume. So learn how to, I would say, first of all, never lie on a resume, because I did notice when I interviewed a few people, like some things that are fishy, the moment I get that the alarm going off in my head, like they're absolute no. So don't ever lie on your resume, but learn how to make it sound more exciting. If you have to take courses on writing resumes, I'm sure there are courses available online. Like I would highly encourage that. I will also share my resume so that you guys can kind of see what I'm talking about. I use a lot of numbers, like this project increased by this much. And there's some cheesy stuff in my resume too. Like in my work experience for the startup, I got the nickname Bustin' Justin. Like I have that on my resume. And a lot of people, even including my manager that I work for at Amazon, during the interview process, like, oh, so why did you get the name Bustin' Justin? It's a good conversation starter. So make sure, like, make it fun. Maybe not too cheesy, but just the right amount of cheese to get their attention. Because at the end of the day, most companies, when I look at resumes, I spend 10 seconds, probably less, like 5 seconds. If you can't get their attention in those 5 to 10 seconds, your resume is done. Especially for a big company like Amazon, where we literally have thousands of applicants a day, it's not done. And for the second part of the question, IBM, I have not seen that course, but in general, I would recommend, if you want to, certificates, at least in America, at least in my circle, certificates don't mean much. If you, as a matter of fact, and by the way, keep in mind that I work for like a very high level company. It might be less true for smaller companies. If I see certificates in your resume, that's a red flag for me, because that shows like you don't have enough to share of your work experience. That's why you're writing certificates. Again, very biased here. I'm not part of the interview process for fresh graduates. So it might still be worth it for fresh grads, but if you have some years of experience, like get those certificates out of there, in my opinion. So I have not seen the IBM course, but so I can't comment on how good or how bad it is. But just in general, I think Udemy is the place to go right now. Because of how much people use Udemy and how much creators are up there, and they are all competing with each other. Like I'm a general believer of capitalism. I feel like these people are always competing with each other, trying to come up with the best content, trying to get the most likes and the most purchases to be on the top of the rank. So this competition naturally makes these courses very high quality, in my opinion, especially towards people who are starting out. One of my frustrations now, as I'm no longer a junior developer, is I don't have much resources for someone who's mid or senior level. And that's a problem in web these days. Everything's geared towards beginners. But if you are a beginner, that's excellent news, because that means there are so much information for you to consume. And I would say Udemy is the place to go if you want to learn web dev.
Okay, thank you. So we don't have any more questions in the Q&A section, but I do have a personal question. Did you ever get like imposter syndrome, or do you now, and how do you deal with it?
I always have imposter syndrome. I feel like even before this interview, I'm like, oh man, what am I going to talk about? I don't know what to talk about. But somehow we ended up going almost 2 hours. So, but yes, I do have imposter syndrome. Whenever I see, like, whenever I read something that I don't understand, like immediately the imposter syndrome kicks in. For example, at Amazon, there's a lot of internal Amazon tools that you're supposed to know about, and even things like AWS. We use AWS a lot. You guys are familiar with AWS, right? I'm not too good at that. That's something that I'm learning right now. So the moment like someone starts like saying all these crazy stuff, I'm like, whoa, like I have no idea what you're talking about. How I get around it is, especially now that I have established myself within the team as someone like as a good engineer, I have the freedom now to say, hey, I have no idea what you're talking about. I have the freedom to say that, and they will laugh and try to explain to me. So it is something that I deal with. And when I have to present to teams outside of my immediate teams, I get imposter syndrome a lot because I feel like I'm inadequate, and those people who don't know me don't have the background experience of me, so they might judge me. So that's always something that goes to my head. But I always try to shove it aside. I always try to ask myself, why do I have imposter syndrome? If it's because of my lack of knowledge on AWS, I try to study it. So I actually ended up doing a lot of studying on my own time on how AWS works and its various technologies. which did make me feel less, get the imposter syndrome less now, but it always exists. So I think it's a good. No, I think I will always have imposter syndrome to a certain degree. I ask my senior engineers, and they also tell me sometimes, not always, they still get it time to time. And I just think it's a natural human thing. And not only that, there's always new things to learn in engineering. So it's almost like an opportunity for you to go study and learn.
Okay, thank you for sharing. So I guess this is a wrap for the questions and the event overall. So thank you to everyone who made time out of their schedule to attend this event. And I really hope you learned something new from Justin and you felt inspired to maybe specialize in a similar direction. And yeah, stay tuned for future events of the Let's Talk Tech series with other professionals in the tech industry. We actually have someone planned for the middle of May, so look out for that. And also, please follow our socials. I actually pinned it in the chat box, so you can see it from there. And also, a recording of this event will be posted on the YouTube channel, so please share with anyone who wasn't able to make it to the live event or any of your peers. And lastly, thank you to Justin for making time out of his busy schedule to be here and to be interviewed. We really, really appreciate it. We really also value the valuable insight that you shared with us.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course, of course. All right, that's a wrap. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone. See you soon.
Thank you, guys. See ya.